to talk him out, and he was expressing concern over his mother. So it was as if he had been programmed, it had worn off. Now, you might say, well, what would be the motive for hypnotizing Ryan to kill all these people? It's straightforward. They made illegal all semi-automatic weapons in the UK after that happened. And they wouldn't have been able to do that if they hadn't had that. Okay, the next one, 1996, Thomas Hamilton. This is the Dunblane massacre. And I think most of the people here will probably know that this guy killed 16 children and a school teacher in a school, and then he killed himself. As often Manchurian candidates do, they're programmed to kill themselves because that means they can't then be unraveled, that it can't be found out that they've been programmed. But Thomas Hamilton was under investigation for being a paedophile. He had connections with some very, very high-ranking politicians. He was a Freemason. He ran a boys' club, and it's rumoured that he would recruit young boys for paedophiles. That's a rumour about him. Now, there was an inquiry into this because obviously the locals, people who lost their children, wanted to know what happened. So there was a government inquiry called the Cullen Inquiry. And certain findings in that inquiry, there was a secrecy notice put on it for 100 years. Now, that's unprecedented. You have a 30-year secrecy, 80, I think, or 70, 80, and 100. 100 is the maximum. So no one who was involved will be here when the truth is known about Dunblane. Now, they only put 100-year secrecy on something usually if it's a matter of national security. So you can possibly assume from that the high-ranking politicians that he knew had something to do with it, or were possibly being, you go on the internet, you'll find out about it. But yes, I think it's highly likely that Thomas Hamilton was a programmed killer. The next one I'll come back to, and the next one I'll come back to. Raoul Moat I'll do last. Now, Anders Breivik, 2011, he killed 77 people. This was in Norway. And there were several people who said they'd witnessed a second shooter. Because quite often with these cases, what we find that the person who's been programmed, there's someone else working in conjunction with them who's possibly an operative of some kind, making sure, maybe steering them, maybe firing a few bullets themselves. And this is the case in various American Manchurian candidate incidents at various colleges that have happened. Now Michael Atherton, this was in Peterlee, not far from here. He killed his partner, her sister, and the daughter, and then he killed himself. And the only reason why I put him there is because he was a taxi driver. Derek Bird was also a taxi driver. Now, I don't know whether that's relevant, but I'm just thinking that if you get in the back of a taxi with a taxi driver and you go on a long journey, it's quite possible they've got something that they can program them with. Maybe. I'm just thinking aloud with that one. Now, the last one, Mohammed Merah. This guy, they said in the news that he was listed as being an Islamic fundamentalist, and he was on a government list as being someone who was dangerous, that might, murder people. But it turned out, some Italian journalists revealed that he was actually working for French intelligence. So if he's an employee of French intelligence, he's not going to be an Islamic extremist. So they've probably turned him into a patsy, I would imagine. So I think it's highly likely that he was a programmed killer. Now, 2008, Sabina Eriksson. Let's just have a quick look at this one. This was a weird case. And I'm going to meet someone tomorrow who's been researching this case in detail. 2008, two Swedish twins, about 40 years old, and they're walking down the central reservation of the M6 motorway. And on CCTV, one of them just runs out in front of a car. So the police are called. And coincidentally, the BBC just so happened to have a film crew nearby. And all this was all on camera. There's been a documentary made about it called, I think it's Madness in the Fast Lane. They're being interviewed by the police on the hard shoulder. And then suddenly, one of them runs out in front of a truck and is seen to go under the wheels of this truck for no reason. Then, seconds later, the other one does exactly the same, is run over by a car. So the police eventually get one of them down after they've been hit by this car, and she's trying to escape. And she shouts out, they will take your organs. Anyway, one of them's taken to hospital with serious injuries. The other one's taken for interview. They ruled out any drugs. They ruled out any alcohol. Okay. Now, the one that wasn't quite as badly injured was released. Shortly after that, she met up with some guy that she just met in the street, I think. And then she stabs him and kills him. And then she walks off, hitting herself over the head with a brick, jumps off a bridge and breaks both her ankles. So she's then put on trial. I think she was eventually convicted of manslaughter. She wasn't done for murder for whatever reason, and she got a 5-year sentence. Now, at that trial, they were trying to explain why two women simultaneously would run out in front of the traffic. It just seems a crazy thing to do. And at that trial, well, sorry, in the documentary, they had this guy. They tend to wheel this guy out, Professor Nigel Eastman, when they're wanting to explain someone's psychology who's killed people, all right? And I think he's probably just bought and paid for to give the official line. Now, he was explaining that at this trial, the defense and prosecution had slightly different explanations as to why these women would run out. But they were both saying that these women had some kind of madness. And one of them said, well, the reason why the second woman ran out is because the psychosis was contagious. That's what he said. And this professor is saying this with a complete serious look on his face. Yes, we believe the psychosis. The sister caught it off the twin sister. It was contagious. So anyway, I rang this Eastman up. Well, I emailed him first. I said, look, I said, you realize you're being used, don't you? I said, have you not looked at the possibility that these two women were under mind control? Okay. And so I rang him up. I got through. And I said, you do realize you're being used? He says, oh, were you the one that sent me that email? I said, yeah. He says, oh, I'm going to have to put the phone down. He just put the phone down on us. He wouldn't speak to us. So there's definitely something with that case. And as I say, I hope to bring out a TV show covering that. Now, the next case, Derek Bird. Now, when someone just randomly kills 12 people, what I will do is look to see if there's a potential motive for perhaps one of those people to be gotten rid of. And this is what I did with the Derek Bird case. This was 2010 in the summer, Cumbria. So this guy, he killed 12 people. He was a taxi driver. He had no previous. And I spoke to a guy in Edinburgh who runs his taxi in the same area. And he said, every person who's got in his cab, he says this guy was the nicest guy on the planet, Derek Bird. Didn't have a bad bone in his body. Right? Now, these are the people he killed. This was a picture I got from the Sun newspaper. The second person in silhouette there was his solicitor, Kevin Commons. Now, the reason why this guy's killed 12 people, supposedly, these are the reasons the mainstream media have given. That he went out with a girl, a Thai girl, and he sent £1,000 to her, and she dumped him. That's the first reason that they say it might be. The second is that apparently 3 of these people worked at Sellafield, and he worked at Sellafield in 1990. And he left that employment under a cloud, and they were saying, oh, he was trying to get his own back on them. The other reason they put forward is that apparently there was a little bit of contention over his will, and they say that's why he killed his brother and his solicitor. But his father died in 1997, so this is a long time ago. So really they're plucking at straws with motives as to why he's done this. Now, I looked at these people, and Kevin Commons, I found a concrete motive. Now, I'm not saying this is the motive, but I'm saying that I don't think the police have looked at this motive, and they need to look at it as a potential motive. If we go back to November the previous year, in 2009, there was really bad flooding in Cumbria, in the area where these shootings took place. There was millions of pounds worth of damage, thousands of homes were flooded, and 1 police officer died in those floods. Now, Kevin Commons, the solicitor who was killed by Derek Bird, his firm of solicitors, and he ran the firm of solicitors, he was trying to sue United Utilities. That's the water company that's responsible for the water in that region. Okay? And what he was saying is that there's a reservoir, I think it's called Thirlmere, and what water companies can do, they can prevent flooding by diverting water around the network, open valves and this kind of thing. And Kevin Commons, he had obtained copies of United Utilities procedures for flood prevention, because apparently the rainfall was not unprecedented. All right? So they were saying the water company was liable for the floods. Okay? And he actually had a letter on his website, on the kevincommons.co.uk, which isn't there anymore, and I wish I'd downloaded it. And he was encouraging anyone who had had damage to their house, water damage, to print this letter out, because it had all of the reasons why he thought United Utilities had caused those floods, all of the technical reasons to do with the water industry and why they hadn't complied with certain regulations. And he was offering it free of charge. He was saying, you can print this letter out, just sign it. So United Utilities must have been getting hundreds of letters from the public, all wanting 10, 20, 30,000 pounds worth of compensation for the damage to their house. So you're talking millions of pounds. And if you read this article, you think, yeah, they could have been liable, all right? And remember, I said, one police officer died in those floods. So if United Utilities had been liable for those floods, the directors could possibly be facing a prison sentence. Now, a week before Derek Bird went on his killing spree, it was rumored in the press that the chief executive was considering stepping down from United Utilities. This is him here. He's called Philip Green. And the managing director did step down in June 2010, around about the same time that the killings occurred. Here's Philip Green with a prostitute in a suit. And Philip Green has had many top jobs throughout industry. He used to be director and chief operating officer at Reuters PLC. So this guy's got some very, very top connections. So what I'm saying is, if they had been found liable for those floods, this guy possibly could have faced a prison sentence. And he's got all these high-ranking friends. And Kevin Commons was the second person shot by Derek Bird. I'm not saying that is the motive. I'm saying I don't think that anyone considers it. Now, we come on to Raoul Moat. Now, let me just say first off, up until the 29th of February this year, I just bought the whole news story the way it was presented, that it was somewhat a jealous lover, came out of prison, was upset at his girlfriend, so killed the new boyfriend, shot the girlfriend, and then just went a bit bonkers, and obviously shot Rathband, and then allegedly shot himself.
It all began 6 days ago when Raoul Moat was released from Durham prison after serving a short sentence for assault. On Friday, Northumbria police were warned that Raoul Moat may pose a risk to his former girlfriend, Samantha Stobbart. The next day, that threat became a reality. Raoul Moat is believed to have travelled to Berkeley and Gateshead and shot his ex-girlfriend's new partner, Chris Brown, killing him, then turning the gun on Samantha Stobbart. Less than 24 hours later, Moat made a 999 call to police threatening to shoot an officer. 12 minutes after that, in the early hours of Sunday morning, he shot PC David Rathband in an unprovoked attack in East Denton. The next sighting of him was late on Monday night, when he carried out an armed robbery at a fish and chip shop in Seaton, Delaval. The following morning, the black Lexus Moat was travelling in was found in Rothbury. A 2-mile exclusion zone was set up as armed police searched the area. That search continued overnight, and police today revealed that they have found the campsite where Moat is believed to have been staying.
And I thought, I didn't suspect any kind of mind programming at all, until Rathband allegedly killed himself, right? Now, the reason why I became suspicious is because as soon as Rathband had died, and this only came out in the media after he was dead, this story appeared, that Rathband had been dating somebody called Lisa French. And as soon as I saw that photograph, I went, whoa, something not right here. Anyone know who Lisa French is? She's a 7/7 bombing victim, right? Now, but she's a very important 7/7 bombing victim. I'll just explain. In the 7/7 bombings, 3 trains were blown up and a bus. She was on the bus that blew up. She had 2 eardrums perforated, she had teeth knocked out, and she was knocked unconscious. Now, the person that the mainstream media allege did that bombing was called Hasib Hussain. 6'4" Asian guy with a huge supposed backpack on him. And not one person on that bus, not one reliable witness on that bus said they saw him. No one. Okay? Now, Lisa French was on that bus and had given interviews, 2 interviews, I think, TV interviews, and never mentioned that she'd seen him either.
Although it's a sad day, actually the nicest part of the day is actually getting to meet up with those people that you have a really special bond with.
What did you actually say to Prince Charles, and what did he say to you?
He was just saying that really it was hard for him to understand what we'd been through, and you know, he just expressed that it must have been an awful experience for me, and I was just telling him how really fortunate I was to just come away with the light injuries that I did.
July the 7th started like any other normal working day. I was travelling down to London. I arrived around 9 and everything looked pretty normal above ground, but I wasn't able to go down into the tube. We were told there was a small problem. I spoke to a steward who told me I could get on the number 30 and let me know which bus stop, and I was actually really pleased that it came, you know, within 5 minutes, and I thought I would get to my meeting a little bit late, but, you know, fairly good for what was going on that morning.
But you weren't going to make it. What actually happened?
The bus moved very, very slowly, and after 11 minutes we'd only made it into Tavistock Square. The next thing, there'd been a terrorist attack on our bus. I have absolutely no recollection of the blast itself. I was knocked unconscious. I woke up and thought I'd fainted, but then I'd spit out my 2 front teeth, and I realised that the lady next to me had also woken up. At that point I realised there was something wrong.
Had you really any sense of what had actually gone on there?
No, and it probably took me a few seconds to actually realise that the bus no longer had windows or a roof, and it was only when I looked across to the park and realised I wasn't looking at the park through a window anymore that I think the full scale of what had happened really started to filter through. There was glass glistening everywhere, and I remember seeing it flying through the air just like fairy dust. But when we looked behind us, there was literally nothing left. The couple we'd been talking 2 minutes before, we couldn't see any sign of them. There were no more seats behind us, and literally the bus just dropped away from where we were sat. We could see the people who weren't as lucky as us. We could see the engine of the bus sticking out, tangled bits of wreckage. It was horrific. The first year was really getting over the physical injuries, you know, my ear operation, getting my teeth fixed, and, you know, just getting a little bit of my energy back. And then I suppose sort of after that, then the emotional recovery, I suppose, you have to start that process as well.
Okay, I'm just going to read an extract from Nick Collestrom's book, which is available here if you want a copy. Okay, now the government held an inquest in 2010, November 2010, January 2011. And Nick Collestrom is talking about that inquest and the fact that Lisa French here actually gave evidence at that inquest. So this is 5 years, more than 5 years after the London bombings. The inquest heard the bus witness, Lisa French, seeming to recall the figure of Hasib Hussain on the top deck of the 30 bus, which had exploded in Tavistock Square. I made the decision, this is her speaking, not to go and sit next to him because I was aware we both had very big bags and that we, you know, would be taking up a lot of room. She recalled him carrying probably a laptop rucksack, quite large, sort of square. So I think that's why I thought it was a laptop bag rather than a camping rucksack. And I also had a big laptop bag. It was a squarish laptop bag like hers, only bigger, and he was carrying it in his hands and then wearing it over his shoulder. It goes on. That announcement from Lisa French at the inquest made headlines around the world. But why had we never heard about this before? This is the first instance of the inquest finding a witness who claimed to have seen something like one of the terrorists where he was supposed to be. She suddenly became famous from what looks like a new memory she had acquired. A moving account was given by Lisa French of the bomb blast at Tavistock Square in 2008 or early 2009, 3.5 years after the event. She had been diagnosed as having post-traumatic stress disorder and given cognitive behavioural therapy to try and cope with her life. And she didn't mention the terrorist in those interviews. In an earlier account, she explains how she blacked out during the blast, at the moment of the blast, so doesn't remember anything. But when she came to, people were talking about bomb and bus. A year after this detailed account, which has no hint of seeing a terrorist, she comes up with detailed memories of going up the stairs behind Hasib Hussain, implying she could recognise him, see him with his laptop bag, etc. Did the therapist plant a memory in her? She said, I went for quite a number of sessions,
over 20, with my psychologist, and he performed some cognitive behaviour therapy with me and also some rapid eye movement therapy too. The CBT therapy involved sort of some discussion around what had happened and how that made me feel, and also quite a lot of homework. So it's important to be able to commit to the process, and not only the hour that you spend with your psychologist, but you really do need a few hours every week at some point. It might not necessarily be during the day, but you need to have that commitment to that homework and preparation as part of the process.
So she's the only person at the inquest propping up the bogus government narrative. So she, Lisa French, is an extremely important witness for propping up their story. And she was going out with David Rathband. So why is this suspicious? Preparations for the government inquest into 7/7 were taking place in the early part of 2010. A pre-inquest hearing was held in June 2010. This means that witnesses taking part in the inquest, such as Lisa French, would probably have been contacted sometime in the months immediately before the Raoul Moat incident. If Lisa French was being prepared by a psychiatrist for the inquest to ensure she would say the right thing, it is possible David Rathband knew she was being set up to provide this testimony. And of course, being a police officer, he would be well aware of the importance of not interfering with witnesses before giving evidence. If this was indeed what happened, then Rathband could have presented a major problem if he were to go public with this information. However, mainstream media reported that the two did not meet until over a year later in August 2011 on Twitter, a claim which I find difficult to believe. This map, Rathband worked at Eagle Lane Police Station. He was a traffic cop. This white area here shows the zone that Eagle Lane covers. The red dot on the right is where Lisa French lives. Okay? Now, David Rathband would deal with hundreds of traffic incidents in that area. Lisa French lived on the edge of that area. Now, it said in mainstream media that he met her in August 2011 on Twitter. So this is a year after he's been blinded and disfigured. He's meeting women on Twitter. Now, I find that hard to believe. She was 35, he was 44, and he's chatting up women who live round the corner on Twitter. I personally think it's far more likely that he met her when he was a serving officer, maybe a year or two before the mainstream media have claimed. I do not know that, but I find it difficult to believe that they met on Twitter, and I think it's too coincidental that they lived, or he worked within a few miles of where she lived. And if you look at the map of the UK, that little blue area is that area, that white area that I've got. He worked there and she lived there. Now, another important aspect of this is the circumstances of the shooting. When I heard that Moat here had shot Rathband, I thought that Rathband's maybe pulled him over and went to check on the vehicle, and Moat's just shot him to try and get away. That's not what happened. Rathband was sitting on his own on the roundabout just up here where the A1 meets the A69 in the early hours of the morning, just sitting there on his own. Moat parks his car nearby, rings the police 12 minutes beforehand and says, "I'm going to kill this copper." And then he goes, shoots him through the windscreen. So what I'm saying is it's completely premeditated. Now, let's just hypothesize that Moat was a Manchurian and he was programmed to kill Rathband, right? The police have a computer system which tell them where every single traffic car is and which officer is in there. Someone at MI5 would have access to that. So they would know that PC Rathband would sit isolated for perhaps hours at a time in that position. So that would be a great time to trigger Moat to get in position, because they know he's there, they can see it on the computer screen, and then trigger his other program to go and do it. It's so contrived and it seems premeditated, the fact that he's actually rang the police and told them he's going to do it. There were other odd things about the circumstances. The two men who supposedly helped him, right, one of them got 40 years, the other one got 20 years. They were sitting in the car waiting for him while he was killing, or sorry, he didn't kill Rathband, while he shot Rathband. So I find that odd, because if they were robbing a bank, let's say, you can understand why an accomplice would wait, but two friends would sit there in the car waiting while their friend went and shot a police officer. That doesn't sound right to me. I mean, it might be right, but what I'm saying is that possibly they've been under some kind of mind control. Possibly. I'm just hypothesizing here because I don't think anyone's asked these questions. Now, it was in the media also that Raoul Moat was given psychiatric treatment in prison before he was released. Now, it said in the media that he had requested psychiatric treatment.